Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Fighting Fake News Problem panel. First of all, I'd like to thank the Intellectual Freedom Committee for sponsoring this panel. We are going to talk about fake news or news literacy. First, we're going to go over what fake news is, and we'll do kind of a definition of what it is and how it's become such a big problem. And then we'll talk about case studies that we've done from our 3 different libraries and how we've used our tools and programming to address the problem. And then we'll close with how we can move forward from this, and also then take questions if we have time. So my name is Erwin Magbanwa. I'm with the Chula Vista Public Library. I used to be with San Diego Public not too long ago, so you're going to see slides here from San Diego Public. All right, so before we go, I do want to say this, and I just want to add this. So this problem, just before, to preface all of this, this is a problem that's not necessarily attached to a particular political party. I know it is, the assumption that it is attached to a political party, but it's actually not. And I will talk about this later, but let me just go over. Let's talk about what, before we go into fake news, let's talk about what real news is. Excuse me. So this is from the Society of Professional Journalists. They are an organization we worked with in San Diego to help us put programming together on news literacy. So this is what they defined as real news. Real news is an honest account of actual events, true facts, and real people. It usually includes the perspective of a diverse range of stakeholders and observers. Real news is factually accurate. Real news acknowledges that different people can interpret the same facts differently. Real news has no agenda other than a search for the truth. So if all of this is kind of familiar, it's because that's what we do as librarians. This is sort of like our mission, is to provide information, or the best information, and all of this is what we do. So what is fake news? And again, this is from also from the Society of Professional Journalists. And you can see this image. This is from 1894, an issue of Puck magazine. There's people running around with newspapers that say fake news on them. It used to be misinformation. Now it's disinformation. It's as you can see here. I mean, I don't really want to read this to you. You kind of know what it is. I don't want to go over sort of the basics of it. I do want to go a little bit about like what it's doing though. So and it's funny because a well-known reporter in San Diego, as I was talking to him about like our programming, he was really frustrated with the term fake news, and he just said, "Why don't you just call it what it is? It's lying. It's lying. Why don't we just call it lying?" So that was a really funny exchange with him. So fake news, as you can see, it's not new. It's actually an old phenomenon that has gained a lot more attention and potency. Fake news you can trace all the way back to John Adams, or probably even before that, 18th century. And what we want to clarify here also is that fake news is not parody news like The Onion, or satirical news like The Daily Show or SNL. This is really news that isn't verified. It's not new. It's been repackaged through social media, and that's where kind of the problem is. And this is a statistic from during the 2016 election. You can kind of see the what happens with Facebook engagements for the top 20 election stories. You can see how they kind of meets up right towards election day. It just got a lot more engagement. It surpassed it, in fact. It overtook mainstream news. Fake news overtook mainstream news during the 2016 election. The fake news problem. So what does fake news do? Well, it hits you viscerally, right? There's something about fake news that it's clickbait. You know, once you see it on your feed, you're kind of intrigued by it, or a lot of people are. And it's a gut reaction. It goes with your emotion, and they're kind of designed that way. There's a problem with truthiness. Is everyone familiar with the concept of truthiness coined by Stephen Colbert? Truthiness it's the idea that something is true because it feels true. That it's like, and I don't want to give examples because then it's like think of however many like Hillary or Trump news that you could think about. Maybe they're not true, maybe they are true, but if it feels true, then it probably is true. So this is where we are. We are in a post-truth society, and this is what fake news kind of feeds off of. there is information overload, as we know. There's no guide. It's not only information overload, but there's no guide of how to use social media. Social media to me seems like it's as natural as drinking from a cup. You just know how to use it. There is no guide for it, and so it's easy to do just to spread false news or false information rather easily. Social media reinforces belief systems, and this is probably the most difficult part. We are hardwired. And this is from Stony Brook University, from the training that I got, I'll explain later. We are hardwired to be uncomfortable with opposing viewpoints, right? We're comfortable in our bubbles. All of us are. It's difficult to consume different viewpoints. So there was a recent study about fact-checking, and I think this was just released last week. And it says that Republicans and Democrats weren't persuaded to abandon false beliefs about election fraud after reading correct information from fact-checking organizations. Fact-checking organizations may provide the public good in their attempts to correct the record, but we should not expect them to lead to a more accurately informed public. So this is a very recent study. People will really stick to what they believe in. The other part of it is that mainstream news, as we all know, is now, and other information sources are now devalued. People don't trust the media, and you'll see sort of a statistic later. Now it's up to the consumer to determine what's the truth. And that is kind of difficult, especially if the consumer doesn't know how to do it. Or they think they know how to do it, but they're not equipped with the tools to do it. And this is where libraries step in. And libraries must step in because this was from 2016, I believe. This is a Pew Research Center statistic. 78% of Americans trust us. At about the same time, Gallup had a survey about the trustworthiness of journalists, and they had them at about 32%. So 78% versus 32%. The trust in libraries was a key point of persuasion that I used with working with the journalists. Is you need to work with us because nearly 80% of the population trust us. Not a lot of people trust you. So do you want to team up on this? Because we'll do it. There's a little bit of good news. I think that the journalist trustworthiness has gone up in recent months. So with that, just really quick overview. I'm going to hand it over to Justin, and he's going to be talking about his news literacy toolkit.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I'm Justin Wasserlein. I work for the Santa Clara City Library, but in this case, I'm talking about the Pacific Library Partnership News Literacy Toolkit, which I was a part of. So after the November 2016 election, because of course, there was a perceived need that the public wanted more information about news literacy and media literacy in general, just because there was so many reports out there about fake news and how frightening that all was and how it spun the election and things of that nature. So Carol Frost of the Pacific Library Partnership decided to put together a grant that would try to address this, and mostly because, as the study showed, people do trust libraries. There's something there that people see in us as a trusted source of information, and that we are a source of information that's vetted and viable. And so, while libraries are perfectly positioned to do this sort of work, there was also notice that not all libraries or librarians had time to develop programs related to this, because as we all know, doing programming takes a large amount of energy and time, and sometimes that's just not going to fit into your work schedule. So, it's more work upon more work upon more work, and having some option to just kind of grab something out of a box and run seemed like a good idea. Also on top of that, though, was that not all librarians felt that they were necessarily prepared to present on these topics. While we probably all have a base knowledge in it, there's certain times where we just don't want to get up in front of people and be authoritative when we don't have all the information. So the toolkit was a way of putting something together that was pretty concise, that you can walk in front of people and say, like, I can present on this pretty confidently. And then people would throw wild questions at you and you'd be off your ball. But nonetheless, it always starts from a good place. So that was the toolkit, was putting together a bunch of programs that people could just hit the ground running and move with. But we also recognized that it needed to be tweakable for people because all of our libraries have different needs in terms of programming and how we do things, and all of our libraries have different demographics and different groups that we are trying to work with. So the toolkit was meant to be malleable and pretty foundational. So it's not soup to nuts, but it is a good place to start, and then you can start moving out from there and address your own communities in the way that you think they would best respond to it. So it's a good start point. How it was created was Carol Frost put together a LSTA grant, and then later Yamila Alvarez from Pacific Library Partnership also came on board to kind of spearhead this. And one of the parts of the grant to begin with was that she put together a media literacy forum. And with that, she brought together, I think it was like 30 to 40 different librarians, journalists, and educators to all get together, talk about what they saw as the problem of fake news and news literacy. Carol hates fake news, so I'm trying to avoid the term fake news and just refer to it as news literacy in her honor. But nonetheless, that's a lot of what we talked about, was how we saw that showing up in society, how we felt patrons wanted to address it, and how we could come forward and try to meet that need. So the Media Literacy Forum really gave us a good structure for how we wanted to put the toolkit together, so that way we could start going in different avenues and hitting those marks for what we thought that patrons needed from us in that point in time. After that forum, a working group was put together, of which I was a part of. Emily Week of Oakland Public, Elaine Tai of Pacific Library Systems, Gail Mason of Santa Clara County Libraries, and Allison DeGoss of Palo Alto City were the librarians working on it. And then Susan Clark and William Cooley from Common Knowledge were basically there as consultants who really got us to kind of open our eyes to different thought processes and avenues to kind of get outside of our box a little bit. With the working group, we pulled together a bunch of content that already existed in relation to news literacy, and also built some tools as well to start putting into the toolkit. Part of this is, with the Media Literacy Forum, all of us librarians got together and talked about what we thought the problem was, but we didn't really have any patron information at that point. So we also set up some patron focus groups and pop-up surveys that would allow us to actually hear from the folks that we wanted to reach and find out what they thought their needs were and how they wanted to get better literacy or news literacy skills. Once that was all put together, we gave it to libraries to test, got some feedback back, and then finished it off, and it was released earlier this summer. The thing it focused on was 5 key concepts. The first one was changing media, or the changing media environment. And this came up a lot. Mostly, it's kind of almost generational, where in traditional media, you had authoritative sources and a few methods of distribution. And now we moved into an environment where everyone is a source, and anywhere you go, there is distribution points. So it was kind of trying to understand how that shifted and what that means for people. The next one was fact versus opinion and fake news. And really what that means is, what are the different variations of fake news you run into? Why are they formed? Why are they created? Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's kind of nefarious, but all the different types of fake news that you might run into versus what's actually, as Erwin was pointing out earlier, real news. We had a lot of debates about real news because that is also highly fraught. It requires you to believe that news coming from an authoritative source is actually as legitimate as anything else. So that's always in quotation marks for me. Evaluation of information and verifying claims, bread and butter library work, that stuff is pretty straightforward. It's what we know. Determining bias we talked about, and that is not just the news bias. When you engage with news, you should look for media bias, but then also you should look to your own personal self for your personal bias, because how you receive that information and engage with it is also very dependent on your bias, and all of that works in an ecosystem that creates how that news is digested by you. And that part, we often think of media bias, but we really wanted to hit on the personal bias aspect. And finally, the role of social media, just because it has become such a big player in news distribution, how news feeds work, why things pop up, where they pop up, et cetera, et cetera. The toolkit provides, the heart of it's a core presentation. So that goes over the entire span of what we have put in there. And then, but the thing with the presentation, and again, with everything, is that it's tweakable. So the presentation can be broken into different parts if you want to focus on different subjects and elaborate it on, or you can just do the whole thing A to Z and you're good. And then there's a ton of infographics and posters, handouts, program ideas, social media tools. Basically just a big menu of options that you can pull from should you want something quick and fast that you can put in front of your patrons. And that was the idea, is like if something comes up in the news, fake news related, this gives you an option to just go with some to program really quick, assuming that your library is able to do programs really quick. Not always the case, which comes to the challenges. So the topic was, actually, well, I'd switched these slides, so forgive me a second, it's gonna go backwards. But we got not a lot of feedback from user libraries to assess how this thing works. And part of that was that we had run up against a deadline with the grant where we needed to get it finished. But with libraries, sometimes they need a lot of lead time to do programs. And so we kind of hit that wall where we weren't able to really play test it in a way that we wanted to. So hopefully over time, people will give feedback to Pacific Library Partnership and they can tweak it and adjust it. But that is one of the considerations. The other thing that I think I need to bring up, and I've been trying to figure out how to frame this all morning so I don't sound super pessimistic, but I'm basically a hopeless grump, and so it's going to come off that way anyways, which is the way that we approached this was from an educational perspective, assuming willing participants. And what I mean by that is that we are giving all this information to libraries to put in front of people, and we hope that people come to these presentations in good faith and that they will try to learn something and maybe change their opinions or behaviors if something pushes them towards that. But in the past 2 years, I think we've learned that goodwill or good faith and a willingness to change behaviors and opinions is not really, it's in short supply these days. And so there's so many different cultural things that make this fake news problem bigger than what we can actually address, that the toolkit really is just a skill set. And it's something that is really foundational to have, but it doesn't necessarily address all the problems. I mean, when I started doing this in 2016 after the election, it kind of feels innocent because we were like, oh, people maybe just didn't read the article properly, or they didn't check their sources, or maybe their news feed popped something up and they went. But really, I mean, like I was at dinner the other day and someone was talking about 50,000 gang members coming through, the caravan up to the border, and it's just like, why are we even doing this? Like, what is going on? But what I've come to realize is that, yes, there's a lot of larger issues at play in this that compound the confusion about it, but these are foundational things, small things, low bar things that we can do that kind of just keep chipping away. And that it's really important that we do these things. It's disheartening at points because you won't see the gains, you won't see the wins, but you keep doing it because it's important to do. And hopefully over time, that will start to change the environment. And there's so many other ways that libraries can work on the larger issues as well, and the conference can be held about that. But really, in terms of this is a quick way that you can grab some tools, run with it, and start trying to make small changes in your community. So I will hand this off. Oh, I should mention, the toolkit, you can go online and get access to that, and that's in the slides. Or I have 5 copies up here if anyone wants a paper version and would like to type out a ton of links. It's better digitally, but you're more than welcome to grab a copy. All right, thank you very much. I'll hand this over back to Erwin.
All right, so now I'm going to be talking about the San Diego Public Library case. We called our programming series Breaking News at the Library. And this came about through our being selected as one of the 5 libraries. This is in 2017, fall of 2017. We were selected as one of the 5 libraries to take part in a pilot project. The goal of the project is to train library workers to equip adult patrons to become more discerning news consumers. So it was kind of a train-the-trainer project. The other 5 libraries were Skokie Public, Huntsville, Madison County, Estes Valley, and Auburn Public Libraries. So we were the 5th one. And this was a partnership between ALA and the Center for News Literacy at Stony Brook University. So right off the bat, what we did was put together programming for it. We worked with League of Women Voters San Diego and Society of Professional Journalists for special events like these. If you could take a look at the attendance for these, this is a lot of people. The League of Women Voter one was the first program that I've actually had to close the doors on people and tell them that we are full. It was really hard to do. I think we were catching people at just the right moment because I think leading up to this point, which was in fall 2017, there was no way for people to kind of discuss this problem, and it was a big problem, and people were anxious about it. And of course, League of Women Voters, with their reach, boy, as soon as that topic went out, it was just we had a feeling it was going to be huge. So this is the one on the left, the image on the left, and that is gosh, I forgot her name. She is with Snopes, and she spoke about her experiences fact checking and how the news works. The other program on the right was the citizen journalism program that we worked with the San Diego Union Tribune and other news organizations to put this together. And these were reporters who wanted to tell people how the news works and what to look for. And you'll see a little bit more of what I'll show a slide of what they used for that. So yeah, they were really, these initial programs were huge. Eventually, we also put together programs that were a little more focused, like minorities in media. We even had a talk about bots and algorithms and how on social media and how they operate to spread fake news. So we try to focus in on that, and again through partnerships. These are the presentations that we had. But we also, and I want to do a shout out to SDPL. My colleagues there, Sean Briley and Trevor Jones, they decided to put together a workshop just with librarian power. We're going to use our librarian skills to teach people how to tell or how to be a more discerning news consumer. So this is one example they used of how clickbait. You see this and you're like, oh my God. And you know how that goes on your feed. Your brewery makes beer from toilet water, and the first two paragraphs are, yep, that's what they do from toilet water. But if you scroll down, it says, actually, no, it's not. It's actually recycled water, and it's actually pretty good. But you don't get to that far, right? Because you click on it like, oh, this is true. And then you start commenting, oh, this is preposterous. This is awful. San Diego's the worst, or something like that. So then, they took attendees into the paces of what do you do next with this? Check the source. Is this a parody? Most importantly, keep reading, because there's probably way more information here than you're being led to believe. So that was fun. They tried that workshop. And coming up is this is a slide from the citizen journalism workshop that the journalist that we partnered with gave to, or had a slide up there for attendees. And this is really just a lot of ways to be a better news consumer. That's their objective was really, they call it citizen journalism, which I wasn't quite sure what that meant at first, but originally they wanted people to kind of like be journalists on the scene and be able to report. And so in order to do that, they taught them the basics of journalism. So, but then it turned into this, how to be a responsible citizen journalist. If you see a news item that's seems fake, go through these 11 steps. So these happened from, again, fall 2017 through spring, and leading up to summer of this year. And we kind of just ended it because the project was done. The media literacy program was done, and we had a few takeaways from the program. So number one, at the time, fake news is a popular topic. Obviously, the crowds were amazing, and we were finding people had a really strong need to talk about it. Obviously, I mean this is the topic to talk about lately, and to be with like-minded folks. That was one of the big things, is that they felt like this sense of oh, finally I'm working with people who kind of feel what I feel. The anxiety and frustration was very evident just in the way the comments were. It's funny because even when we talked about how to be a news consumer, the discussion just went off on its own. It became political, and I have to credit the journalists and also our staff. We did not want to make this political. We did not name politics or names or anything like that. But the audience did. They started attaching names to it and political parties to it, and we tried very much not to steer the discussion that way, but it did tend to become political. And also, people wanted more such programs. They were like, "Well, what's next?" Because I feel the need to keep talking about this or do something about it. Again, really frustrating time. So the successes were, much needed forum to discuss this topic. And really, one of the best things is that people learn how the news works, the news cycle. I learned a lot from it. I didn't know that, and the best part, I think, for me was that people learned that it wasn't just news. People didn't just get news. They just, people or journalists didn't just throw things on the wall and see what stuck. It was like there was a process involved. And so that was really fascinating. I hope people took a lot away from that, but and I think they did. And ultimately, it's to empower people to become better news consumers. I know that Justin was talking about it feels kind of hopeless, but we still need to do this. If we didn't do this, then those audiences are not gonna, it's just gonna feel even more hopeless. So to have this kind of forum, to have these kinds of programs and toolkits and resources, at the very least makes people feel like, hey, the libraries are on your side. We're still gonna keep trying to fight, and we are, let's see what more we can do about this. So now I am gonna go sort of a little bit of a pessimistic note here. The challenge is, and we discussed this after all of the programming, are we reaching the right people? Are we preaching to the choir, basically? One of my colleagues said, that's fine, because the choir is going to get louder and louder. And as long as we keep preaching to the choir, we're still singing the same song, that's fine too. And people, as we've already mentioned, those people are very comfortable in their bubbles and echo chambers. They just don't want to think otherwise. And the fake news problem is immense. And I think Justin was alluding to it. It's just like this huge amount of it's just a whole phenomenon unto itself that's almost insurmountable. And latest, there was an MIT study that indicates like the speed and reach of fake news. It was just unbelievable what this does. So with that note, I'm going to hand it over to Moni.
What a great note to come in on. So a little case study with Escondido, just because our community, we are located in North San Diego County. We are one branch. We serve about 150,000 people. And they skew from a lot of much older and conservative to really low income and minority adults. And so what we need there a lot is computer classes, job, and social services. So one of the things that we did was a fight fake news panel through the Society of Professional Journalists. And on the panel, we had Sarah Libby, the Voice of San Diego, Arnie Ojeda with NBC San Diego, Tom Jones, who is a reporter also with NBC San Diego, and Lynn Walsh, who is a project manager from the Trusting News Project. We did a ton of marketing for this program. And actually, we visited local schools. We do outreach actually 2 to 3 times a week. So we went to the colleges and the high schools. We offered service credit hours to students for attending the program. We talked to patrons. It was our main priority for the month before to talk to people in-house, hand out the flyers personally. The journalists promoted it through their social media channels. So this thing had a really wide reach. However, it had a pretty low attendance. We had 25 attendees. You can see the empty chairs even in this cropped photo. And, and as we know, in public libraries, it can be hard to translate engagements to butts in seats. But, also, I think it suffered from a number of things. And what are you going to do is you're going to learn from something if it's not quite what you want it to be. On the right-hand side there, you can see that was our flyer. And again, I just described our demographics. The colors, the font, it's not the easiest to read. We were really excited about it because it's edgy. We wanted to do something edgy. But it has the fake news, in there. It's harder to read. The colors are aggressive. We absolutely loved it, but it suffered from politicism. I would go to hand it out to people at programs, and they would say, "Oh, is this a Trump thing? No, thanks." Even people who are anti one side or the other, we all kind of need a break from that. You come to your library for whatever things you come for, and sometimes being talked politics to is not what you love. So it was a little bit radical, but I really believed in the program, and it became very high quality and very informative. So right there in the middle of the thing, I decided to do our first ever Facebook live stream. And immediately I had 5 people pop on and they said, "I wanted to attend this," or "I hadn't heard about this, but thank you for posting this." And they started asking quality questions. They started engaging. And to this date, the videos live on Escondido Library's Facebook page and actually have over 1,000 views, which is our highest watched video. So in the future, with the takeaways that I just mentioned, I am going to provide a citizen journalism class with a few different reporters and journalists in the community. And, due to technology and social media, when we talk about citizen journalism, we don't realize that, that you, there on your Twitter might be able to have breaking news faster than a journalist would be able to report on it. And so empowering people to kind of be able to create news in their community that's real news. We all have our busybody patrons, and those people can be wonderful advocates. So it's about empowering them, pointing them in the right direction, how to evaluate news sources, how to, again, chip away at the problem and talk to people in their community, talk to their friends and family about, okay, you may have this opinion or the other, but at least see if this source is a good source. I think this will have broader appeal than kind of talking at them about, what fake news is. So what can we do to chip away at this problem? We can stay informed. You're doing that by attending this panel, reading and watching real news, evaluating your own sources, the PLP toolkit or other toolkits for educators, and know your community. Respond accordingly. If you're near high schools or near colleges, you know that you're working with students that have not yet learned what real news looks like. Respond accordingly. We have our elderly patrons. They are misinformed about news, and they also believe that when they go on our computers that a Nigerian prince is really going to send them $1 million if they just wire their bank account info to them. And so, that comes in with communication. Again, almost 80%, so we saw, trust librarians. You have a rapport. You're the front desk, you're the frontline staff. And we are able to have this communication with our patrons and tell them about resources for real news, sources for avoiding scams online, for identity theft and financial literacy, job resources. They come to us for all of these quality things. And if they reference something that sounds strange, you get the patrons that come up to you and they'll say, I saw this crazy thing on the news and this happened. And instead of saying, no, it didn't, which you can't really do, you can say, oh, that sounds exciting. Let's go see if we can find some information out about that. Networking, getting to know allies in your field, like us, you can talk to us, or journalists in your area. You should have that for your news releases and things like that anyways. Providing resources and events, like we mentioned. And databases. We all have our databases. Obviously, they're high quality. They're very expensive and can vary from library to library. And it's always a challenge to get people to use our databases. And so one of the things that our staff has adapted is basically if somebody comes up with a reference question that would be better served through one of our databases, we actually have a designated computer that if there's not too much of a line behind them, staff will actually get up, take them over there and take the time to actually teach them how to use that resource. We also do, as our marketing campaign, Database of the Month. So basically, we will have information about language learning resources, news sources, whatever it is, and make them the focus for that month in signage, in social media, and in marketing materials that we stuff into items that people check out from the library. Toolkits, we've all kind of seen this this little resource here on the side of the slide. We actually have a community resource brochure. It is a trifold, and it's specific to our community. Where can you reach out when you're looking for specific resources? And it covers a variety of topics, but also news resources are covered on there as well. And it's a good kind of sneaky way to provide some of the social services that we don't always get to put out there as much as we would like. And for better or worse, librarians are human Google. So again, when they come to us and they ask a question, making sure that we are using good news resources and evaluating what we are telling them and citing those sources and teaching them how we did that goes a long way. Moving forward, we mentioned we don't have all the answers here. Well, what can we do? We can advocate, shout from the rooftops, keep chipping away, keep talking to people, keep these programs going, keep your resources going out, learn and share with your colleagues. As we know, as we should know, staff buy-in is everything. If your front staff may not know what resources to provide to a patron when they first come in to check out a book, but they know that you know that and will respond accordingly, or at least give them your information. You have to have your staff on board with things, or what else are we going to do? And again, working with local media, building those relationships in your community. And that's pretty much it for me. Looking to see if we have any questions.
Do we have toolkits specifically geared towards children? The programming I did was adult oriented, so I do not know.
So, in regards to the PLP toolkit, we had a conversation about what demographics we should look at, and one of the things that we, and rightly or wrongly, decided was that children have a lot of resources through schools and education already, and so that we were going to focus on something that was a little bit more general, for just general population, not specific to any particular age group. So yeah, I don't know that one offhand. Unfortunately, the PLP one, it did not address specific needs for children. You have anything to add to that? No.
Yes.
Oh, sure. Let me.
We have the slides on the app, so you can go ahead and just go through there, and you can actually email the slides to yourself. So yeah, go through the app; it'll have the slides ready to go. Yes. Well, hello. So we have somebody from New York Times here saying hello for those who are watching the video, and he'd love to work with us. Again, you're really strong allies with journalists are really critical to this because they also, I always consider us as we're just cousins, really. I mean, we do different things, but we also, we love facts, and we love to see how facts kind of play into a story and how they become a story. Yes. So the question is how to more tactfully respond to when you see an instance of someone spreading fake news and without making it become a flame war, I guess, right? Kind of a thing, or with all the comments. Are you asking if there's a resource or a toolkit? Tips?
The toolkit doesn't have anything specific to that. I mean, it does talk about social media, but it's more so about recognizing what you're seeing in the feed. There's probably some talk about engaging non-factual information. I think that one's kind of fraught just because it's very specific on the person that you're engaging with, because depending on how well you know the person, you might know what their response is, and you may know we can have a civil conversation about this. I will send this article that says something differently, and we can debate about it. Or I'm just going to burn a friend. I don't, and that's unfortunately with social media particularly. I would say, and if it's someone who's close to you, try to have that conversation offline, just because rationality seems to play better in the real world than it does in the digital realm. And so it's one, but if it's a far-flung friend, that might not be a possibility. So you kind of have to play your audience, and sometimes it's just all right, I'll just let that go. Other times you might be able to engage it.
Yeah, I just agree. Or you can send them to your local librarian and we'll set them straight. Either way, so.
Yeah.
Some of the social media, like Facebook, has methods to report fake news. I have no idea how effective it is.
I don't either. So yeah, so one of the things that I should have mentioned too is that this topic evolves rapidly. There's new information, there's new numbers going on every day, and it's a moving target, and it moves really fast. So that's something that I don't know what the outcomes from all of the strategies I know that the social media companies are trying to help as well. I mean, you know this, right? Facebook, Twitter, they're trying to help out as well, and I don't know if it's working or not.
Can I add on to that? Yeah. So the reporting of fake news, I think that's it's problematic in its own right, because if it's disagreeing with you, you might flag as fake news, and so I think there's a lot of working out of how that works when humans flag the fake news. I also would say probably don't trust algorithms that show what is fake news and what's not, because I don't know that it's been done enough to actually know that how effective that works. Because I know a lot of people, when we first started doing these, well, I hear that they're making an algorithm in Facebook that's going to tell us what, or get rid of fake news. So, and it's just kind of this blanket, oh, so everything I see I should trust now, right? It's Not necessarily. So like the technological tools are good and they will develop and they will evolve, but I don't know that we're there yet, that it's really making an effective difference, just because particularly in our polarized environment, the human action of saying I disagree with this is almost the same as saying I flag this as fake news. I don't know that we are there yet with being able to trust what is showing in the social media environment for that.
I think that's where that same thing comes in, is having your network, is having the journalists that you know that you can trust, is having the sources that you know you can trust, is having other people that you're connected with this moving target, as Erwin mentioned, as this rapidly changes, to fact check against each other and kind of see what other people are doing up to the minute.
Susan?
I had the why they need to explore this. Talk about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, so the question is how we can reach out to and provide the training to those who probably need to learn about bias and how bias plays into what they see. Yeah, I would love to, but I don't know how to bring them or how to get to them. Again, I mean, it's like it's one of these, like, I don't know if it's catch-22 or what, but it's just like this irony of, like, they're people are in their bubbles, and then but you need I need to get in your bubble. I'm like, but I'm in my bubble, and I'm not I'm not going out any further. I'm comfortable where I am. It's a really the whole thing about, like, being in your bubble is really sort of like part of the whole fight or flight suite of responses that we have. We don't want to feel that our belief systems are under threat. It's really hard to let go of certain things. And I guess as with librarians, it's kind of a foreign concept because we're always looking for information. We open our minds up to different perspectives, but for a lot of other people, that is not a thing. And so, what they believe in is what they believe in, and it's just rock solid. And I wish I had a better answer for you, but I would love to reach out to them. I don't know what it is yet, and it's something that I'm really curious to see if anyone has an answer to that. Do we need to go where they are, which is, where are they? They're in social media. One kind of cool thing about the Facebook, the live feed, same thing happened to me, by the way. My first live feed from San Diego Public was the citizen journalism, and it got tremendous amount of hits. People are on it, and I think that was sort of like there's a clue there, there's a key there. I think it's because that's where they are, and that's where maybe that's where we get them, or get to them.
Can I add something to that? So in terms of like training for implicit bias, the toolkit has some stuff related to that, but I also think there's a larger, not necessarily training, but opportunities for people from different perspectives to actually talk with each other. And that's a place where the library can come into play on that, because oftentimes when you actually get two people conversing about it, those biases start shifting a little bit. It could be very bad, honestly, that could be very explosive. Or people might start seeing other sides and avenues where it doesn't come across as us being authoritative and saying, like, this is the way that you should see that you're wrong. But rather, these are two people who are talking about what they think is right, and just seeing how that interaction might slowly shift their perspective. And that's, again, it's not necessarily a training, and it doesn't fall solely underneath the news literacy, but I think there's avenues towards that where it's a softer, gentler approach to get people talking that might reduce some of those barriers.
I also think if there's a way that you can demonstrate to people, whether it's in a one-on-one exchange or if they actually come to a program and they're actually showing that willingness to come out of that bubble, but either way, if you can demonstrate an example of how their bias is negatively affected them. Some people are just going to believe what they're going to believe, as we mentioned, but that's that chipping away of, like, well, this is, you almost sent all your money to a demonstrated fraud website, that's not great. So here's how now we can go from, we have demonstrated this is a problem for you, this is a personal specific thing to use where this almost happened, and now, kind of go from there of how we can correct that or not let that happen again in the future.
Well, we are done. I'm sorry if you have any other questions. But if you do have, you can come on up. But it is 2:00 and we're done with our panel. Thank you all for coming. Our contact information is up there. Thank you.